Yeah.
So,
yay, we're
hello,
live.
hello. We're live here today on YouTube, and I'm hoping it's showing on YouTube. But yes, welcome everybody. Thanks for coming. If you're here, if you show up, if you come at any time, or if you're watching in later on, the replay will be up on my YouTube and maybe on Bella's as well, and Fabiana. I don't know. We're going to post it all sorts of places. Oh, okay. Sorry. Just turn it off my phone. There we go. Okay. So, yes, we are. I see we're on YouTube. Okay. So, welcome to Sex in Brazil. Now, I've been living here for the last 3 years. I came here 4 years ago. I think a lot of my audience knows that because I throw in comments about Brazil every once in a while. And I just thought it was time to do something about what's going on here, what I've found for myself, what I've found from talking to people, because there's a lot of unknown. I think there's a lot of unknown. Before I came here, I really had no idea. I had an idea, but I had a stereotyped idea about what was going on in Brazil, and I had met a few Brazilians in Vancouver because I'm from Vancouver, and they just blew everybody out of the water. I mean, these Brazilians were sexy. They exuded sexual energy. They were very confident, very present. They had this energy that was very different than people in Vancouver. So I was really, really intrigued about what is going on down in that country. And the concepts, the idea that a lot of people had, people that I was talking to when I said I'm going to Brazil, I mean, everybody thinks, oh, there's wild parties all the time because of carnival. Carnival is this wild, crazy sexual party that's happening all the time in Brazil, and people are just preconceptions that people are very wild, very sexy, very crazy. So I thought, okay, let me go see what's going on down there and see if this is true, what's really happening. I knew that the energy was going to be really different, and so I was really intrigued to find out about that. So now I've been here, and I met Bella while I was here. I met Fabiana as well. Bella and Fabiana Fabiana is in Brazil right now, and she'll talk about that a little bit. She's been here for a while. Bella was for a long time. She's now in Miami. But all of us are not Brazilians, full-on Brazilians, but we have spent a lot of time here. We're all three of us. Someone's got some feedback there. We're all three of us very interested in sexuality, the study of it, the experiences of it, the exploration around sexuality. And so I wanted to bring Bella and Fabiana back on because they always have really awesome perspectives around what's going on for them. So I entitled this Dating, Relationships, Marriage. I think we're just going to get into a lot of different aspects around these things to do with sexuality and what is going on here in Brazil, or what our perception is now after being here and living here and having relationships and dating and all that kind of stuff, and a little bit also about how we compare it to our own countries. And like I compare it to Canada. Bella spends a lot of time in the States. Fabiana, I don't know, she's been everywhere. Italy, originally from Italy, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So we have those perspectives too. So it's really like this this world perspective. So yeah, let's just each say a little bit about how we're feeling about the topic and a little bit about ourselves, and then we'll just keep sort of organically flowing through this conversation and talking about what we're finding, what we're feeling. I have been. Oh, we lost Fabiana. Well, she'll be back. She is deep in the jungle, so she is our nomadic goddess who is really like diving deep into the energetics of the country of Brazil, and that's why it's so important to have her here. It's like a deeper connection to nature and to the wild. So she's going to talk about that. I'm in the main city of Rio de Janeiro, so really in the heart of, near Copacabana, in the heart of the international community coming in to the city and experiencing and exploring. And Bella was also around. She's been living in a lot of different parts of Brazil, and okay, so let's get on to the topic. I'm not sure exactly where I want to start, except that let's each just have a little time to chat about our entry into Brazil and where we're at right now, and then a little bit about some ideas that we have, and we can share and share how we're feeling and share experiences through that. Bella, Fabiana, I got to bring her back on. Bella, why don't you start while Fabiana comes back? There we go.
Thanks, Lianna, for having us back. I really missed our conversations. We used to have quite a lot of conversations about, the topic of sexuality, but also many others, the awakening of the wild feminine, and they're all related to this, the mix between energy and sexuality. And today's topic is actually very, it does have a very stereotypical kind of perception if you think about it, but I think it goes way deeper. And the way I wanted to start about this conversation is really to share a little bit about my experience and my perception as someone that comes from a very traditional country. I'm from Armenia originally, where obviously, sexuality is not openly discussed, nor is it, so out there and in the open. And then moving to the US, where there's much more openness about sexuality, but yet it's still very closed off. And we'll talk about that, why I think I have my own theories. And then moving to Brazil in my late 20s, where I experienced this deep reconnection to my own sexuality and femininity, which was actually part of the whole journey of not just related to sexuality, obviously, but related to well-being, related to my spiritual growth, related to discovering who I really am. But at the core of it, interestingly, I think sexuality was, as it is, if you connect it to the chakra system, it is right there at the bottom. It's our second chakra. So I think once you align your sexuality, everything else gets aligned. And for me, that was the experience. And that's why Brazil for me was so important. But going back a little bit, even the first trip to Brazil, I remember, going from I think, 15 years of living in the US, arriving in Brazil, you just feel the aliveness in the air, the sexual energy, which is really, it overlaps with this aliveness. So that's why I don't want to label it as only sexual. To me, the sexual energy is really the energy of everything, right? So you feel more alive, you feel like you are the presence, right? You feel present, you feel seen, and you feel more alive. And in the beginning, this is me analyzing it, right? In the beginning, I didn't obviously think what's happening here. You just feel excited as soon as you land in the airport in Rio or wherever, Bahia. You just feel alive, and you're like, whoa, what's happening here? Where's the party? And the moment I arrived in Brazil, I was like, I want part of this. I want to be living here. I want to be experiencing this energy, whatever it is. And looking back, having spent 11 years in Brazil, and now having left about 4 months ago, I already missed that energy, and I already missed that flow that you feel in the country. And so for me, I feel like what distinguishes Brazilians in general, the Brazilian culture, from other cultures, especially from the North American and European cultures, is the fact that in Brazil, and this is obviously an overgeneralization, right? But I feel like people are much more embodied and really grounded and super connected to their bodies, right? Which creates this powerful force. It's like, when in comparison to other countries where you feel like people are really cerebral and rational and completely disconnected from their bodies. So there's that disconnect from your own energy, right? Whereas in Brazil, you immediately feel like people are just in the present moment. They're there, and that energy is flowing through them in a very powerful way. And that's, again, it's the energy of, vital energy, as the Chinese call it, and in Taoism, sexual energy and vital energy is one and the same. It's also, to me, the beginning of the spiritual connection that you also, like, if you live, I think Fabi will talk about that again, that spiritual connection starts from the sexual connection, except, in other countries, if you have this going to the spirituality through your mind and through, through the top chakras. In Brazil, I feel like it almost starts with the lower chakras, so it's like an embodied form of spirituality. So it's a big mix. It's hard to describe it, but to me it's like a very powerfully grounded culture that lives in the present moment, and hence is very connected to that powerful energy. So before we even go to that conversation of relationships and how people, how dating and marriage and all of these things work out, I think it's important to have taken that step back and say, it's just, you feel it as soon as you arrive. That difference is powerfully present. It's palpable in the air.
Yeah, absolutely. That is the one of the main differences is energetically. It's a very different feel than, well, I can compare it to Canada, and again, it's that depth coming from below, like Bella was saying, but it's also it's you start to realize that it's a sexual energy that is being used in every aspect, in the creativity of the country, in the creativity of the people, in the way that they flow. The energy is really moving in a much bigger way, in a much more embodied way. Again, like you're saying, it's really flowing all the way through, and there's also a very strong connection to being very intimate with each other. And it's not, it can seem kind of sexual at first if you're not used to it, because in Vancouver, people aren't kissing each other, hugging each other, men aren't holding each other. It's not that kind of energy, it's that kind of connection happening. But here it's happening all the time. People are very comfortable with touch, very comfortable with having their body touched by somebody else, by kissing other people. And it's a little bit, off-putting at first, like, what's going on? Like, is everybody want to have sex with each other? And you realize that it's not that at all. It's that's how people grow up. That's what they're taught. That's how they interact with each other. And you eventually get involved in that beautiful energy. And it's just so loving. The love is just very, very powerful here, and very big.
I just want to add, Lianna, you said something that's so important too, that sexuality, it's almost like the definition of sexuality is different in Brazil. It's much wider. It's not that, like, the sexuality is a taboo topic to, discuss only in like pornographic movies and whatever. It's like everywhere, but it's also very pervasive in everything you do. So I think that makes it super different.
Mm-hmm. And we'll get into that a little bit more too, because there's another side of that as well, the sexuality, right? So let's just hear from Fabiana. Let her.
Yeah, just connecting. Well, hi everyone, first of all. And just connecting what both of you said, I feel that, this sexuality and creativity and celebration are definitely like a whole one thing here in Brazil. And I think that's what brought me here at first and what made me really stay. It was the art, right? Dance and music. I always say that that's the big differential, at least compared to Europe. Well, even in Italy, where people think that we are very musical and dancing, I think we used to be, maybe, or maybe like depending on the region, but nothing compares to Brazil. So when I came here, and you have like rhythm, I feel that there's rhythm everywhere in everything you do, which has to do with movement, like Lianna was saying, and it has to do with partying, like Bella was saying. And this rhythm is the rhythm of life, and it is the rhythm of the sexual energy, because without moving, right, and without being carried by this spiral, then we don't generate any tesão, like we call it here, right, which is really this triggering energy force that makes you want to do things, you know? And usually this starts with celebrating the moment, you know, no matter what is going on, but, you know, there's always some type of celebration that happens through the body and through this rhythm, you know? So that to me is definitely like one of the key elements that we find here that might be very different from elsewhere. And that's definitely what made me it was like magnetized me here, you know, as a good Sag girl that loves to party and loves celebration. I was like, okay, the soul has found its country. It's Brazil. So yeah, that's what vibrates around here for sure. So love it.
Yeah, that's so true. The celebration aspect of it. And a lot of people come here for carnival to just for a visit. And carnival is a countrywide celebration where there's dancing and there's parades of music and people dancing and moving along different streets, and people are dressed up in costumes, and it's sexual. I mean, people are dressed in very sexual ways, and there's a lot of interaction with each other and a lot of connection going on, and a lot of people meet each other here. And there's so many stories. I met people here who came here on a trip for carnival, found a Brazilian, fell in love, and they're still here. And you know, you get swept up in this energy very easily because it's just so full of like Fabiana said, celebration, joy, and intimacy, and just and love, and then it has this. It's a stronger sexual energy because it's more fully enveloped in people and in the country, right? So I think that's a big difference that I find than from Canada, where people are really reserved and held back and not expressing themselves, and kind of afraid of their sexual energy. Here, it's people are not quite as afraid of it. They're not afraid to allow that energy to move through their bodies.
I also wanted to add to that I think that sexual energy in Brazil is almost like it's people are not afraid for it to go around. You know, it's like you don't the more it's kind of like the same as energy of love, right? It's like there's so much that you have to give that, you know, it's not an endless source, right? Whereas in most of the countries we see this, you know, for example, in the US, I feel like there's a lot of this thing of, you know, it's like you can't look at someone because they'll think it's sexual harassment, or you have to limit yourself in doing this because then, you know, they'll think and, you know, and in Brazil, it's almost like, sometimes you might feel uncomfortable, maybe, but most of the time it's a very, I don't want to say innocent also, but it's a very playful type of exchange. You know, you look at people, you smile at them, and there's like some flirtation going on, but it happens on all levels. It's not just men, women, or whatever, right? It's very much an energy that's given around for free. You know what I mean? It's like it's not reserved for specific occasions. That's I also see. It's like sexuality. We often, in northern countries, we think like sexuality is reserved for this, this, and that. There, it's for everything. So that's and then I guess we could start a conversation around dating and stuff, because that's how I feel. You know, it's like I don't even think there's a word dating in Brazil, because you don't date, you start namorando immediately. First, you know, it's like it's almost like you're in love immediately. And sorry if I'm jumping in directly to this, but I think this is a like huge distinguishing feature for me. Whereas in most countries I've been to, it's a very, you know, it's like the courting process or the dating process or the, you know, in Brazil, it's like if you feel it, you go all in, and it's like a very passionate endeavor, and you might burn really fast. You know, that namoro might last for like a couple of days, but it's very it's an all or nothing type of thing. The mind is completely turned off, and this is where I really think that's a big distinguishing factor, is that it's not in the mind. It's very much in the body. It's very much in the energy. It's very much felt and sensed rather than thought out. There are no rules on dating that you don't call the person because they'll think I'm being too easy or I have to wait for a couple of days. It's kind of a very yeah, it's like you jump into the cliff and you see what happens. That's how I see dating in Brazil.
Yeah. I feel it's all very related to life in a way. When we're talking about like these forces of celebration, it has to do with life moving through and like this life force that um is present, and I think part of it is also like the celebration of life, maybe because then looking at a most social aspect and without romanticizing too much as well. In a way, life is I would want to say more, I don't know if vulnerable here or like more, unstable in a way. I mean, we know there's more risk of whether it's death or illness or poverty or all of that. So like any moment is worth celebrating, right? Is worth like being fully alive, because you don't know when it's going to be next. You don't know if you're going to be alive tomorrow. So I feel that maybe unconsciously, but that has a lot to do with this energy being so like wishful to be and lived all the time. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's
No, I absolutely agree. It's like this poignancy. I don't know how to pronounce that word, right? It's like this urgency of living your life to the fullest. And I think I really connected to that energy because like, I don't know, in my early 20s, I experienced some really serious health issues. And, I was like, I felt that already. It was like, once I recovered from that, like for me, every moment is the moment to live your life. And I almost felt like I was judged when I was living in the US, for instance, on working in a professional setting. Like we would arrive, let's say, at a hotel in Bahia for work, and I was the only one who would go and take a dip in the water before meetings. And I was like, how can you not? There's this beautiful ocean, like go. And that energy of like really taking advantage of every second is yeah, I think it's like you said, Fabi, it's like the energy of life and living, and very important. Again, without romanticizing, because there are downsides to the way that life is lived in Brazil as well. But I think that's kind of the first thing you really experience is that urgency of life.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, I mean, just take it back a little bit. We all came here as well, different ages. I think. I mean, I came here in my early 50s, so I was experiencing it quite different than you were maybe experiencing when you arrived. And I also I came not expecting to meet anyone or have any kind of, I didn't know what kind of experiences I would have. I just wanted to see what was going on, what it felt like energetically, and date some people and see what the men are like. I'm interested in men, so what are the men like in Brazil? And I found, for anybody who's thinking of coming to Brazil, I mean, it's quite easy to meet people. It's people are very friendly. People are very open. Men approach you. Men are not as scared to talk to you. There's the connection happens very quickly. If you want to go farther, you can easily, create what you want. I found that one aspect that was really powerful was this possibility to really create the reality that you want very quickly. So, if you're, and it's almost kind of magical, like if you're coming here and you want to like have some interesting relationships with people, and it's easy to meet people. People are interested in meeting other people and going out and enjoying, like Fabiana is saying, this idea of celebration. People like to go out. People like to, and it could just be going to the little corner bar and sit down and have a drink, have a beer, and that's usually what it is. But people are out a lot and enjoying each other and talking to each other. And so there's a lot of connection going on, a lot of meeting up, I think there's a lot of sleeping around very quickly, very easily. People are are wanting connection with each other. So the dating scene, and I want to hear a little bit more from you guys around the whole, if somebody was to come to Brazil, because I'd like to also talk about that, like what if someone's coming to Brazil, what are the possibilities of meeting other people? And my experience is that it's easy, and it's people are open and friendly, and you don't have, and like Bella was saying, there's not a lot of preconceptions of, okay, I'll get your number and I'll call you and maybe I won't. I mean, it's pretty straightforward and pretty clear. You can create what you want.
Yeah, but also, as it is easy to meet people, it's also I find men to be very non-committal in Brazil as well. So it's very, just because they're infatuated by you one day doesn't mean they will be tomorrow. And I think that's true of, I think, dating in general, right? But there is definitely not that rule where it's like, like no one feels obligated to do anything just because they were in love with you yesterday and they were promising to.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of flakiness as well, which is very difficult for those, those of us that come from countries where time is very, like for example, one thing that would drive me crazy with my ex-husband when we were dating is like, we make plans to meet on Friday night, and it would be like 8 p.m. on Friday, and I still have not heard from him. And I'm like, what in the world does he think he's doing? And but that's the living in the moment. That's part of it. So you have the positive aspect of that, but you also have the aspect of like, well, we were going to go out at night to dance, and dancing starts at midnight. So there's no problem that I'll call you afterward. They don't actually think about that date until until they feel the desire to see you. So, and if you take it as, it's like disrespectful, or it's like a booty call or whatever, then you're in for a lot of like, self-judgment and worrying. But if you just allow it to happen, and like, that's like, when in Rome, do like the Romans do, right? Like that's how Brazilians roll. And it's like, either you get frustrated about it or you don't, and you enjoy it. So, Fabi, what do you think?
Fabiana, what is your?
I can definitely relate to the time frustration, in general, and with like my ex partner as well. I think that was the reason for like most fights, but so that, definitely recognize everything you said about the flakiness a little bit, but also the surprising, unplanned spontaneity, which makes it fun for sure. So there's a lot of fun involved, which once again, for me and my type of personality, is definitely like a plus plus, right? So I think like that's the thing. I do feel that each of us has a specific vibration, like that aligns with certain types of environments and certain types of cultures. And that's why, it's so important and great that we choose to live certain places and with certain people, because you can't have it all, right, under these aspects in every place. So it depends on what's really important to you, right? So in the end, like, when I have to balance it out, I'm like, okay, I guess fun is more important than time. And so still here, but yeah. So definitely you have the ups and downs and challenges as well. I think like there's challenges anytime actually you have a relationship between cultures, right? Whether it's romantic or not. I mean, that is as multicultural and international as we are, and open-minded as we are as spirits and souls, but there are challenges. It's just inevitable, because of the habits, because of beliefs, because just assumptions that you have, collective unconscious. I mean, like all of it comes together, and then you're faced by it. And you're like, oh, and you realize that, you know, in the end, we are different. We're the same, but we're different. So that is a great exercise for growth. That's how I take it. You know, any type of relationship with someone that has a totally different background is an excellent opportunity for growth and evolution. So to me, that is also quite exciting. But yes, we got to be ready
Yeah,
for it.
I guess we're you know, we're coming in with a perspective. Also, we're foreign women coming in, and it's our perspective. Um, and our perspective about sex in Brazil, relationships in Brazil as a foreign woman, connecting with a completely different culture. So that's like a whole conversation right there about what all of these kind of. I mean, for me, because you know, another culture is always bizarre compared to your own culture. Trying to readjust to the way they deal with relationship, sexuality, how they deal with the daily lives, how they deal with their daily routine. We're talking about the time thing. Brazilians are notoriously late, so that's something that, you know, in Canada we're on time, and so you know I know a lot of people struggle with that type of a thing, that type of a way of being. It's kind of just accepted here. And so there's a lot of different elements like that. But besides like being able to meet people, and people are a lot of fun, and there's a lot of like dancing and festivity and having, you know, going out a lot. I generally find it to be very conservative when it comes to sexuality. Right now, and I mean, I've come from a big background of exploration sexually, and from a very underground world in Vancouver. Vancouver is conservative too, but I've kind of gone a little bit deeper. But I find here it's generally quite conservative. So there's that upper layer of just like, yeah, fun, go, yeah. Well, you get into the relationship a little deeper, and then there's some very sort of strong beliefs about what a relationship should be, what you know what the partners are going to do as partners, and it's very conservative, based on sort of these new modern ways of dealing with having relationships. Brazil is a conservative type of, you know, they create very conservative relationships generally. What do you guys think about that?
I think it's also, aside from being, you know, what you're describing, it's also very, I don't know what the right word is, like polarized in terms of like the women and men. And you know, right now I'm just talking about the heterosexual relationships, but I think it applies also to other types of relationships. But it's like women go out of their way to be women, and men are it's like a lot of like masculinity and femininity are really polarized, and that is an important factor in creating that initial attraction and that pull. It's like the magnets and the, you know, it's like the like electricity and the magnetism, right? Like pulling each other together. But then in relationships, that obviously creates traction and a lot of conflict if you're used to more egalitarian and more, you know, and also, you know, going deeper and having, for example, I found it very difficult. Let's say like communication is very difficult in relationships because people normally are not used to talking about relationship, whereas, you know, in the US you hear a lot about communication is the key, and even from in bed, you know, from sex, you know, like telling people what you desire and want, to the relationship and discussing the relationship. It's a very conflict avoidant culture in Brazil, so especially men in general dislike talking about relationships and sex, and it's just like, it's like I said, it's a very body experience thing, and so that could create that superficiality, I think, Lianna, because it's like you are not really, you know, you're on that superficial discovery, but when it comes to like taking the relationship deeper, a lot of people are resistant to that. So yeah.
Well, I guess it has a lot to do, I mean, in the end, with just sexism that is like, I mean, worldwide, of course, still existent, but here as a Latin country, it's quite strong, definitely. So you have all those gender power dynamics that are, as you say, I guess, like, then I can see the conservative vibe, coming up for sure. And I mean, and also remembering that it's a very um Catholic country still, I mean, despite like being quite open spiritually to other types of spirituality and opening up more and more, but once again, that collective unconscious is, definitely very, very, very Catholic. So you still have all of that. um and that, to me, I mean, I can very much relate to Italy, which is even more sexist than here. If there's a country that I think is more sexist than Brazil that I experience, it's Italy, probably. And that's where the Catholic Church is even stronger than here, probably. So there is definitely a relationship, without wanting to blame or talking bad about anything. But there is this side that definitely still influences a lot the way we look at sexuality in general, whether it's conscious or not. But it's been generation and generation of teachings and rules and dogmas that we're now trying to deconstruct. So sometimes I feel like people don't even realize it, but all of these, even like these comments or these attitudes that they have towards sexuality, they're strictly linked to maybe like some type of dogma that they're not even religious, they don't even know about, but it's so ingrained in society that people end up reproducing it. So yeah, that's definitely present as well.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as you enter into the relationship there, because in Canada, in the United States too, there's a lot more conversation going on now about relationships, and a lot of people are dealing with finding ways to create new kinds of relationships. What is this guy? Somebody's writing something here. Hey, love. Okay, very nice, very nice. So they're really. I should like.
Maybe you should block that.
Yeah. Goodbye. Hello. So yeah, we're having a lot more conversations, I find, in North America. Not that they're not having conversations here, because there are some sex therapists, sexologists online that have huge followings here, and they're really trying to get conversation moving. Hopefully I can find somebody to come and talk to me a little bit more about what they're finding. But they're trying to bring out more information, and I think it's just been a lot of slow entry of information about sexuality here. So once the relationship starts, it becomes that initial fun has kind of starts to dissipate, and you're entering into like a kind of a relationship and a connection, and you're going to build a life. That's when it becomes more conservative, and it's the values aren't, people are not used to talking about possible alternatives. Not that they're not, they are. There is some conversation going on, but there's not a lot of conversation going on. Belly, do you want to say something?
Well, I wanted actually to add something important about this distinction that we're talking about. We talked about a lot of different topics, but I think it's important, since the conversation is called Sex in Brazil. I did want to kind of highlight the actual differences in the practice of sex and how it's different, in Brazil as opposed to other countries. In my experience, I think that's an important topic to bring up as well, which relates to what we're talking about. Because it's a very in the moment kind of culture, and very, like we said, grounded, and like the sexual chakra is very very open and flowing, right? I found that the the experience of having sex with other people is much more like organic, natural, and flowy, and non-linear and non-goal oriented. And it's the timing. Even though we're talking about the timing, right? And like I think here it comes as an advantage, because it's like there's no, when you're in that experience, time stops, and it doesn't matter if you whatever late for work, late for whatever. I feel like that time, like indifference to time is kind of plays is a key importance in the Brazilian culture for improving and having richer sexual experiences, in my experience. Because when you compare that to a lot of the northern European and American cultures, there's very like limited time to dedicate to sex and sexuality, and it's very, in a sense, goal oriented and specifically focused on, almost like, have you had the orgasm, right? Like that's you had your story today, I think, about that, and it's like, it doesn't matter, it's like, who cares? Because yes, they're great, but the whole experience is really important. And I think, like we said, like sex starts way before it actually happens, wherever it happens. And it's like, I feel it's like there's a lot more like versatility in a way.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very kind of all pervasive thing, right? It could start with a look, it could continue on a dance floor, and it's like, it's much more inclusive in a way, right? Again, I don't know if I'm being very
Well, the sexual innuendos, the connection of that intimate kind of play. It's in the language, it's in the body movements. It's always there. I mean, people are always saying, "I love you." They're like, "You're so beautiful." They're calling each other angel and diamond, and like everybody's just so. There's just a lot of compliments, men giving women compliments, women giving men compliments. It just the language just allows for a lot of flirtation and a lot of constant kind of connection. Even I had a talk with a guy that lives on the street this afternoon, and he's telling me little things that are flirtatious and kind of sexual innuendos. Not that he wants sex; it's just built in the language. So you're always getting this kind of feeling of being in that energy, right?
right.
And so, with your partner, I mean, I'm just going to speak for myself, but my partner's always talking with really beautiful words and saying beautiful things to me. And that's not something I necessarily got when I was in Canada. So you always kind of feel really loved and cared for. But there's still that traditional context of, you're my woman, minha mulher, you're my woman, and that idea of the control of you. This is your mind. You're mine, so no one else gets you ever. So, but jealousy, the concept of jealousy too exists all over the world. But I think it's pretty strong here. And I mean, just living in an apartment, living in a house, I've heard some pretty intense fights between men and women, screaming fights, which people just are way more passionate. So if there's any kind of problem, you are going to hear it across the city between couples screaming at each other, passionately and angry, and jealous, heavily jealous. So do you have that experience?
We're not romanticizing this stuff, by the way.
There's a certain intensity.
Don't get a relationship.
Right?
No, I'm joking. But well, I'm just looking also at, like, from people that I've talked to, but also from the television is constant. The dramas that come out, it's just so wrought with jealousy and this control over one's woman or one's man. And so, yeah, relationships get complicated when you are from another culture and you're entering into a world where, there's this whole belief system that was built around, Catholicism and heavy duty obligations around the church, and sexuality, which is just so wanting to burst out all the time. And there are communities that are talking about sex and stuff, but there's still a lot of inability to and low level of education around actual sexuality and pleasure, like really deep sexual pleasure. I mean, Fabiana, you have been sort of in the tantra community. What do
Right.
and I know it's not that big either, and there's not a lot of stuff offered even.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I was just first of all laughing at all of this. I guess that's an interesting outlook, at least for me, of how it is different also for you, Liana or Bella, coming from North America. This fact of like the intensity and the fighting and the loud, discussions. That to me was something that actually I think it's even not as bad here or not as intense if you compare it to Italian drama. I guess that's where the Latin blood really comes in. I'm like, oh yeah, sure, we're not fighting, we're just talking. I mean, I'm a Roman, so that's usually what we do, but there is an intensity going on for sure. um Now, yeah, you were asking me about the tantra community, right? And it's really interesting because I've been transitioning and transiting actually between a little bit here and an international community, and I can definitely tell that they're quite different. Once again, I feel that here uh there has been a focus on, well, the therapeutic side, which I think all over the world actually that's how tantra has been sort of interpreted, even though originally that's not really the goal or the focus. It's much much more about divine connection and spirituality than body therapy or trauma therapy, but it can definitely work for that, and that's where it's been taken to, right? But here, in addition to that, it's really been like orgasm oriented, as in like expanding pleasure. So once again, it's really like focusing on pleasure. I guess pleasure, it's a really big value of Brazil, right? So it's here, like all of the community and the teachings are all about how can you have more pleasure. um so that is this hedonistic way of living that is so typical, I find, of Brazil, which and I'm not criticizing here because I'm like total hedonist here. That's why I live here, and I think that pleasure is like super important, super valuable, and yeah, priority in life. um but yeah, for some reason, and it's really interesting, I wonder when this shift is going to happen or when the things are linking, because Brazil is an extremely spiritual country. I mean, at least for me, that's where I really dove into my spiritual journey and growth and all of that. And you see this vibration of devotion also, and of faith and all of that all over in life, right? Not just in a field or in religion. Once again, it's something that permeates all areas. But then it's interesting because then in the tantric community, that is actually supposed to exactly do that, right? Heal sexuality and bring divinity into the body through sexuality. There's still a resistance, I feel. That the focus has been much more, yeah, just body oriented and not as spiritual, which, yeah, now I'm just reflecting upon this now actually, but it is interesting. It really shows how much taboo there still is about sex, I feel like, that is yeah, that despite being so open and free, but there are like some really deep beliefs that don't allow us to see as sacred yet. And even in a liberal country like sexually, let's say, as Brazil might look or seem, so that's an interesting paradox in a way that shows us how there's so much to heal about sexuality, actually, even in a country that apparently seems to be like totally open and free, right? And is allegedly like very sexual. So yeah, that's just an observation.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really interesting observation, and I find that as well, and that's why I see sort of this surface layer of how people are, they're brought up around being very intimate and connective, and the language evokes passion and love and all of this, and so you get the perception that they're very sexual and they really understand sex and they really get into this deep sexual connection, but it's not a very deep layer, really. I mean, there's some depth, but when you say, Bella, like there's that flow and people have things happen organically, and you're at a carnival and there's events and you're having connections with all sorts of people, but trying to go into deeper levels of really understanding what sexuality is about, really allowing, and this is new stuff that's coming out in North America too, like allowing the woman to lead with her own pleasure, allowing her embracing the fact that she can have her own pleasure. And here I find, it's very male dominated. It's his pleasure, it's his decision, it's his flow, it's his lead. Generally, that's sort of an older way of looking at how sexuality flows. Women here are very empowered, but I know having talked to quite a few women, there's a lot of frustration in them being able to have the kind of sexual experiences that are really going to allow them to open up and expand and tap into their multi-orgasmic states and their spirituality and their transcendence. Being able to have that, they're finding difficult.
Yeah, I think it's a contradictory culture in many ways, right? So I think in many ways it is very liberated, and the relationships are very much more, again, sexual and like very passionate and very flowy and connected, and I think also in some ways much more connected to the energy, to the spirituality. There's like there isn't as much of a separation between that than I see in other countries. Like there's like sex is here and spirituality is there. I feel like there is definitely less of a gap in Brazil around that. And yet I think because it's such a still patriarchal society, there's still definitely a focus on the male pleasure over the female pleasure, and there isn't that woman's voice is still not heard as strongly and loudly in this sphere, especially. Yeah, I think it's there's a lot to ponder here, but it's
well, and it's also women are very highly sexualized here as well. There's the ass, the butt. It's like the Brazilian butt is famous, of course, but it's like when you're here, sometimes you feel like, and if you get into really getting into sort of deeper kind of music that's around like music that's coming out of the favelas, music that's the what's the music called?
funky.
Yeah, the funk, the Brazilian funk music. I mean, it's very sexual. It's very much about the ass. It's very much about very basic, fundamental, just basic. I don't even know if we say that word here on YouTube, but basic having, the sexual act, and the woman is very sexualized, and she's playing in the game the guys are playing in the game. The whole country is almost playing in the game because everybody wants to have that ass. Everybody wants to look at, look the look, as opposed to who am I, as who am I as a sexual being without having to have this physical look that is, stereotypical look that everybody wants to have. I find people generally, there's an embracing of the body, and there's a lot of body shapes and types, and people are generally comfortable with their bodies. If you go to the beaches, you'll see people wearing string bikinis in all sorts of shapes and sizes, and nobody's really blinking an eye whether somebody's fat or skinny or whatever they are. Everyone just, this is my body. I'm comfortable with my body. But there is a sort of it seems to be there's sort of this desire to look a certain way and have a certain kind of shape in order to be considered, sexy, and then you're sexualized.
Although I feel like
I'm still digging into this whole thing because it really interests me. But it doesn't seem to be super empowering for women, in that way.
That's why I think there's a growing counterculture against that, like from Brazil.
Yeah.
Very against that over-sexualization of women, and
absolutely.
That's not supposed to be the way for liberation, just like like you say, objectifying women doesn't mean empowering women.
Yeah.
And so I think, but I do think there is a fine line there, right? So up to a certain degree, like you said, it's like you own your body, and you, if you feel good about it, and that if those movements is what you want to do, that's what you do, and that's fine.
Right.
But if that becomes kind of your defining feature, and that you have to be a certain way in order to be seen, then we're running into a problem. So I think it's a very, like, where do we draw that line, right? And every woman has to draw that line for herself.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If she understands that she's able to, and that she has the tools and the information and the education to understand that she, it's a complicated country, and it's a big topic we've thrown out here because we've got lots of layers of people, lots of layers of cultures, from Italian to African to Spanish to Portuguese. You get all these kind of cultures, not just that, but there's just such a mix of people that have come here and have created this beautiful country, that there's a lot of layers. There's a lot of layers to look at, and we're kind of, I think, we're throwing out our own experiences from what we've seen and what we've gone through and who we've talked to, but there's a lot. Like, I have a lot of questions still, and I'm wanting to do more discussions with people here in Brazil and do a series that's going to really dig in deeper with a lot of questions that I have around what's really going on and what are people really feeling around sexuality.
I have a friend who says that, and he's Brazilian, and he says that Brazil's bipolar. And I'm like, that is quite a good definition, because I feel that a lot. There's all this depth and superficiality at the same time, which is, makes it intense. Intense is like my best description for this place.
Yeah, I mean, the people here are generally beautiful people, physically beautiful people, and as well as physically, internally beautiful people. So there's that. Anyways, it's like you're just saying, it's like bipolar kind of thing. You see this beauty and this language and this passion, but yet there's layers there that have not been looked at, have been suppressed, that have not had the opportunity to grow yet, right?
Yeah. I just want to say, I think as we're trying to make a conclusion out of this, there isn't a conclusion, right? Because there's a lot of threads that you need to bring out and then explore them in and of themselves. There's a lot of things, but I think one major thing again for me is this mix and this openness that exists around sexuality that goes beyond sexuality, that really makes the country very distinct and very, it's a great place to explore your own sexuality, your own ability to just feel alive and really break the taboos around what it means to be sexual, what it doesn't mean to be. And it's just, like I feel like Brazil offers that ease and playfulness around the topic, to go discovering it without any preconceived notions, right? I think that's something that I really appreciated about, or still appreciate about Brazil, and in a way I miss that lightness that exists around the topic, and I think to me that's kind of the main distinguishing difference that I want to conclude with.
Yeah, and taking that as a point to conclude my observations here too, as also linking it to that tantric path I'm on. This what you just said, Bella. It's really interesting because maybe it really inspires me to and us to think about what is sexuality in itself. You say that it's sexuality beyond the sexuality, right? I mean, like that is something that permeates our life. So maybe that makes us think like, what is really sexuality, right? Is sexuality just sex? Like, what is sex? There's all of these things that once we open up our vision, we see that, yeah, there's much more to it. I mean, like dancing is sexual, right? And not just because, but it's just a form of expressing our sexuality, just as like food or nature or, yeah, just life. And then it goes back to that life force and the aliveness in really living and going full in. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, lovely. Yeah, that's so true. What is sexuality? And it does bring on a lot of questions here because the creative aspect of sexuality, the sexual creativity here is huge. People are just bursting with creativity, and that is part of the sexual energy, and that's the life force. And so that's very different than anywhere that I've seen. Certainly in Canada, very different. That flow, that ability to just let that creativity come out. And so is that yeah, that's a good question. Is that the expression? Is that there's the physical expression, there's a spiritual expression, there's it's a life force energy. It's a major energy that we're carrying, that aspects of it have been really squished and suppressed and closed down, and other aspects have been allowed to be free and flow. And so it's tricky.
Yeah, but I also think that Brazil is like this country where that's like the sexuality was in some way, at least partially, and there's obviously still a lot of room to grow, but it got out of the box, and that's really important. That we allow that sexuality to permeate, like you said, like if it is to go into the creative aspect or the spiritual aspect or whatever it is, right? Create or destroy that barrier that we've created between sexuality and everything else. I think it's a country that allows you to experience at least those first steps in freeing that energy.
Yeah.
For me, that's been the experience, and I feel like I see it in a much more holistic way now than I did before.
Yeah, it does give the opportunity for you to be free and explore what it means for you.
Exactly.
Right? In really any degree, because there's really one thing for sure is very accepting for people's need or desire to explore what they need to explore. So I don't know. There's a lot of things we can continue to talk about. There's just this is a big topic. I love like the stuff that's come out today. Like just brought more questions. and we're probably going to need to talk again and narrow down the topic.
You can call us back and we can talk about each of the specific topics separately.
Yeah, exactly. There's just so much. There's just so much within each of them.
If your listeners or whoever is listening to us have any specific questions, we'd be happy to address them, whenever it is that we have our next session.
Absolutely. And so I think we'll wrap up. We've been here for about an hour, and thank you for listening in. If you've had that opportunity, yes, leave some questions below. We are still exploring and trying to figure things out ourselves, diving into into this world of possibility. And I love this, what Fabiana is saying. What is sexuality? Like, what is it? And the definition is likely very different for every country and maybe for every person.
Yeah.
So I'm going to leave it there. Thank you for coming, Bella. Thank you for coming, Fabiana.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having us.
Thanks, Lianna. Thanks, Fabi, and thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much for being here, and we will see you very soon again. Much love making.